interviews because it is a little different than the average interview. So just kind of give you an idea of a little bit about me. I've been a firefighter now for 27 years. 2 years I was a volunteer firefighter in Canada, in Ottawa, and I'm currently working as a career firefighter, like I said, 27 years for Peterborough Fire. Let's see here. And in addition to that, I'm currently working as a captain with Peterborough. I've also been teaching in the pre-service firefighter education training program now for approximately 20 years. My focus is career prep, and I have been doing that for 20 years now with Fleming. And the other focus I have is auto education. Those are kind of my two kind of courses that I look after. And of course, I teach multiple other courses there as well from time to time. I've also worked at Seneca College, where I did do career prep or mock interviews with them as well for a couple of years, a few years ago. I've also been doing mock interviews and critiques for approximately 20 years now. I do face-to-face has always been primarily my main focus because I do find that that's probably one of the best things you can do, to prepare for an interview is actually do the face-to-face and run through, the entire mock interview process and then do the critique. And that's all recorded, of course, but over the years, computers and stuff like that's come out. And I started off with Skype, and then I started doing online ones. And now, of course, I use Zoom. So I do mock interviews through face-to-face and Zoom. And like I said, I've been doing that for 20 years. I also own the firefighterinterviews.com website, which is just a membership-based site that has a lot of different information on it, from videos that I post to mock interviews, as well as previous departments interview questions, articles on how to maybe even resume prep and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things on there, but that's a membership base that I have owned for a number of years. I also co-authored the study guide for the firefighter interview, and that was probably over 10 years ago. We never did a rewrite on it, just a couple reasons. It was a very expensive book through Thompson Delmar Learning. And we could only update it every 4 years. And of course, with interviews and changing trends and stuff like that, which we'll discuss, you really need to be able to update your information on a year-to-year basis, because things do change pretty quickly in the interview process, especially in firefighting. So that's why we moved more to the online stuff rather than doing the rewrite. I've also wrote articles for firehall.com. That was a magazine that was out probably 15 years ago, quite a while ago, but I used to do monthly articles for them as well. And I think where I got I had a lot of my, information and a lot of information gathering that I've got is over the years. I've attended the Firefighter Career Expo out of the Toronto area. They had it in Vaughan, Mississauga, kind of all different areas of the GTA. And we hosted basically the mock interview sessions that are held at the end. And a lot of information gained through there, just talking to fire chiefs and different questions that are asked and things like that. So I do have quite a bit of experience. So we'll start with the PowerPoint I have. It's about 40-minute PowerPoint on how to prepare and basically what behavioral-based interviewing is all about and how it relates and how it might relate to the firefighter interview, which is a little bit different than a lot of interviews, business interviews and things like that are out there. These are kind of the 7 points I'd like to cover tonight. And again, I should just mention too, that if anybody has any questions, interrupt me. I want this to be an informal session. So if anybody has questions, please let me know, just voice your concerns or questions, and I'll stop my presentation to answer them. But these are the 7 points that we're going to be running through. Basically, what is behavioral-based interviewing? Why do fire departments use this particular style? And some things to expect from the interview panel when it relates to behavioral-based questions. Some key points to consider when developing your behavioral-based answers, and how to prepare specifically for behavioral questions. I also have what I call a top 10 behavioral firefighter competencies / categories. I have them. And I was just copying that off my website onto my PowerPoint today. And one thing I noticed, and I should have changed it a while ago, is something like, for example, diversity. I had diversity at number 9 in my top 10. And just over the last, I'm going to say 2 years, the diversity question, maybe 3 years, the diversity question went from maybe 30% of departments asking it now to, I would say, over 95% of departments ask it. Almost every department is asking the diversity question now. So, and the last thing I'll just talk about is, let me just kind of move this bar here. And the last point I want to talk about is just the different types of firefighter competencies and skills that the fire departments will use to gather their questions from. Okay, so what is behavioral-based interviewing? So behavioral-based interviewing usually starts with tell us a time when. And what the interview panel is trying to do is get you to think of a story from the past that relates to a specific competency that the department's looking for. So you're trying to relate a competency or skill, or I even say characteristic trait, through a story. The reason why departments being asked this, and part of behavioral-based interviewing, is that past performance is going to predict a future performance, which is important for the interview panel, because if you could prove that you've had that specific skill, competency, or trait in the past, and the methods that you used in that particular situation, you're going to use that same performance in the future as well. You have to be very good at storytelling, because behavioral interviewing is all about telling stories, which typically firefighters, A personalities, aren't very good at, in my experience, in doing interview coaching. Is that something that I think we as a group lack, is that it's just not in us to really get into telling stories and talking about ourselves. And I don't want to say bragging, but you've really got to sell yourself. And it's something that's I found for a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable for people. So the behavioral-based answer ends up being very short, and they end up cutting themselves short, and they don't sell themselves. So some of the reasons why departments use this style is it allows them to determine if you have that competency. So if a department feels, for example, stress is a very important, like stress management. So that's the competency of stress management. So if they find that stress management is a really important competency, because if you look now at a lot of things that are going on over the years, even in 2015, I think Forbes magazine ranked firefighting as the most stressful occupation. And if you look right across North America, I would think that every single department has somebody off on PTSD right now. And that costs the city money, and there's a lot of things that are involved in that. So the city, when they're looking at interviews, they want to see if you have that competency to manage stress effectively. Because if you could prove that you have it in a previous story, a previous situation, and you use key mechanisms to manage that stress, the thought is that past performance is going to predict that future performance. So knowing that you're understanding of stress management, you understand those issues and how to manage that stress. If something happens in the fire service where you do encounter something that is stressful, you know how to manage that afterwards, and you'll employ similar tactics and strategies. And one thing I was going to mention here too is that a lot of departments, I find, tend to keep the same competencies from interview to interview, and that's one of the reasons that competency. So if you're not in that direction of that competency and you're going off track and you're not there, or you haven't hit it yet, and the interview panel knows that you haven't mentioned anything about how you maybe manage your stress in that situation, they'll start asking you questions. So, for example, what did you do to maybe help with that stress? What was your role? What were you thinking? How did you feel? When they ask those types of questions, they're leading you in to that competency, because they really want to get the best out of the interview candidate. It's more of a hypothetical scenario, just so that you guys could have an idea of where to focus in on the competency. And I'll kind of go through it fairly quickly, and I will say this, that it should be more involved before I even start, but I'll start